Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavai, tejasvina vaditamastu, ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So we're still in chapter 2 of Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. And I think there's enough of us to go ahead with the reading. So I'm going to start back just a little bit from where we left off last week. He for whom you have been seeking all over the world, for whom you have been weeping and praying in churches and temples, on whom you were looking as the mystery of all mysteries shrouded in the clouds, is the nearest of the near, is your own self, the reality of your life, body and soul. That is your own nature. Assert it, manifest it, not to become pure. You are pure already. You are not to be perfect. You are that already. Nature is like that screen, which is hiding the reality beyond. Every good thought that you think or act upon is simply tearing the veil, as it were, and the purity, the infinity, the God behind, manifests itself more and more. This is the whole history of man. Finer and finer becomes the veil, and more of the light behind shines forth, for it is its nature to shine. It cannot be known. In vain we try to know it. Were it knowable, it would not be what it is, for it is the eternal subject. Knowledge is a limitation. Knowledge is objectifying. He is the eternal subject of everything, the eternal witness in this universe, your own self. Knowledge is, as it were, a lower step, a degeneration. We are that eternal subject already. How can we know it? It is the real nature of every man and woman, and he is struggling to express it in various ways. Otherwise, why are there so many ethical codes? Where is the explanation of all ethics? One idea stands out as the center of all ethical systems, expressed in various forms, namely doing good to others. The guiding motive of mankind should be charity towards men, charity towards all animals. But these are all various expressions of that eternal truth. I am the universe. This universe is one. Or else, where is the reason? Why should I do good to my fellow men? Why should I do good to others? What compels me? It is sympathy, the feeling of sameness everywhere. The hardest hearts feel sympathy for other beings sometimes. Even the man who gets frightened if he is told even the man who gets frightened if he is told that this assumed individuality is really a delusion, that it is ignoble to try to cling to this apparent individuality. that very man will tell you that extreme self-abnegation is the center of all morality. And what is perfect self-abnegation? It means the abnegation of this apparent self, the abnegation of all selfishness. This idea of me and mine, ahamkara, and mahat. That's not right. Mamat. What is that word? Haima, do you know that word? Ahamkara and
Mamata, brother.
Mahat.
Mamata.
Mahat.
It says mamata.
mamata.
Uh-huh.
Okay, ahamkara and mamata is
Mamata.
the result of past superstition. And the more of this present self, and the more this present self passes away, the more the real self becomes manifest. This is true self-abnegation, the center, the basis, the gist of all moral teachings. And whether man knows it or not, the whole world is going slowly toward it, practicing it more or less. Only the vast majority of mankind are doing it unconsciously. Let them do it consciously. Let them make the sacrifice, knowing that this, me and mine, is not the real self, but only a limitation. But one glimpse, by the word but he means only one glimpse of that infinite reality which is behind, but one spark of that infinite fire, that is, the all, represents the present man. The infinite is his true nature. What is the utility, the effect, the result of this knowledge? In these days, we have to measure everything by utility, by how many pounds, shillings, and pence it represents. What right has a person to ask that truth should be judged by the standard of utility or money? Suppose there is no utility. Will it be less true? Utility is not the test of truth. Nevertheless, there is the highest utility in this. Nevertheless, there is the highest utility in this. Happiness, we see, is what everyone is seeking for. Happiness, we see, is what everyone is seeking for. But the majority seek it in things which are evanescent and not real. No happiness was ever found in the senses. There never was a person who found happiness in the senses or in the enjoyment of the senses. Happiness is only found in the spirit. Therefore, the highest utility for mankind is to find this happiness in the spirit. The next point is that ignorance is the great mother of all misery. And the fundamental ignorance is to think that the infinite weeps and cries, that he is finite. I'm going to repeat. The next point is that ignorance is the great mother of all misery. And the fundamental ignorance is to think that the infinite weeps and cries, that he is finite. This is the basis of all ignorance, that we, the immortal, the ever pure, the perfect spirit, think that we are little minds, that we are little bodies. It is the mother of all selfishness. Excuse me. You see how well organized Swamiji's talks and thinking, his talks are and his thinking is. It's hard to find a place to stop. He just rolls on like the big muddy river. By that I mean the Mississippi. This is the basis of all ignorance, that we, the immortal, the ever pure, the perfect spirit, think that we are little minds, that we are little bodies. It is the mother of all selfishness. As soon as I think that I am a little body, I want to preserve it, to protect it, to keep it nice, at the expense of other bodies. Then you and I become separate. As soon as this idea of separation comes, it opens the door to all mischief and leads to all misery. This is the utility that if a very small part of human beings living today can put aside the idea of selfishness, narrowness, and littleness, the earth will become a paradise tomorrow. But with machines and improvements of material knowledge only, it will never be. These only increase misery, as oil poured on fire increases the flame all the more. Without the knowledge of the Spirit, all material knowledge is only adding fuel to the fire, only giving it into the hands of selfish man, only giving into the hands of selfish man one more instrument to make what belongs to others, to live upon. Without the knowledge of the Spirit, all material knowledge is only adding fuel to the fire, only giving into the hands of selfish man one more instrument to take what belongs to others, to live upon the life of others, instead of giving up his life for them. Is it practical? Is another question. Can it be practiced in modern society? Well, that's a place for us to stop and discuss what we've read, I think. In the society we're living in today, what do you think? Can this selflessness be practiced? Can we be in our minds and in our spirit, in our soul, in our being, move away from the idea that I am a limited, separate being, and therefore I have to take care of myself, look out for number one? Is that possible now? What do you think? No one want to venture an opinion?
Well, I can give my 2 cents, so to speak.
Okay, Divya, I'm glad to hear it.
Where Swamiji says, the first thing is we have to stop measuring ourselves in terms of, well, back then and with the British Empire, it was pounds and shillings. I think in our society, it's dollars and cents. And the worth of an individual human being cannot be quantified in terms of utility. I think that still is true of our society. I think we live our life just in fear that our value is dependent on, again, money and property. And again, what Swamiji says about me and mine really resonates with me. I wrote that quote down last week after we started reading this chapter. I've read through it, and it really just hit home. It's like the more you say this is mine, it's again that I, and that I doesn't exist.
That separate I indeed does not exist. According to Swamiji, according to the teachings of all of the great teachers, that I does not exist. Anyone else? Thank you, Divya.
Yes.
That was good. Anybody else?
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I think that the extent to which Swamiji is talking about unselfishness is extremely difficult. Even though conceptually, speaking for myself, I get it, but there's some sort of self-preservation that, you know, that makes it difficult to do this complete self-abnegation unless, I guess, I progress more in the spiritual path. I mean, there's a point that just something, it is very hard to get to that level of unselfishness for me, I think, at this point.
Thank you for being so sincere. Anyone else?
I see Brother Shankara, Swamiji mentioned happiness is only found in the spirit. I can truly agree with that. If that in the thought level, in the spirit level, if it doesn't come like internal loci and external loci, if we don't have the internal loci, where if we are only dependent on external loci, it's very difficult. It just, that's what I'm understanding. We have to be able to find happiness from inside out, not from the outside in. Only little comes from outside, but not the true happiness. It has to be internal. He said in the spirit.
Beautiful. And Swami Prabhavananda, in an attempt to try to explain to us why we continue to seek things in the realm of the senses and think that there will be happiness here, is that he said, desire is nothing more than a restlessness of the mind.
Agree with that.
That restlessness of the mind is disguising from us the bliss, the perfection, the spirit that is our true nature. That restlessness of the mind is disguising that from us. So that when we have a desire and then we satisfy that desire, for a few moments, the mind is no longer restless and so doesn't disguise the bliss, the happiness that is behind its eternal restlessness.
Surely.
It's the ignorance. And so in that moment, we experience a little happiness. We experience a little bliss.
True.
And then, of course, he says that, Swami Prabhavananda says, the mind goes back to being restless.
Mm-hmm.
And its restlessness is its nature. It's prodded to it by the gunas, constantly being prodded into this restlessness. So then it seizes on something else. It doesn't have to seize on something else, but it does. It's its nature to seize on something else that will then, oh, if I have that, or if I have that again,
Yes, more and more.
it'll make me happy. Because it made me happy for a moment a while ago. And the Buddhists, who are very good at measuring and classifying, very, very good, the Mahayana, the big Buddhists, they really are, they've made a real exercise of it. They have determined that the most wonderful thing that could happen to you, the greatest honor you could receive, the whatever it is, that would be the most wonderful thing that you could imagine, The restlessness of the mind will be abated only for 3 days. Maximum 3 days. There you will be in a state of kind of blissfulness, ecstatic happiness over what has happened to you for that period of time. Now, if we think about 3 days, 3 days may seem like a long time in some measures, but even in the length of a human life, let alone in cosmic terms, it's absolutely inconsequential. What Swamiji is talking about here is eternal happiness, which, of course, in our ignorance, those are only words to us. We don't know what eternal means. We don't know what limitless means. We don't know what infinite means. So Swami is saying the way to find out those things is to rid yourself of the ignorance and trust that if you do practice, he uses that glorious term, self-abnegation.
That's true.
Which the saints call dying before you die, self-effacement, self-abnegation. If you do practice it and stop measuring yourself, as Divya pointed out, the Swami said, our sense of utility is to measure ourselves by our possessions, by our net worth, how many thousands or millions or billions we have. But as Swami Sarvadevananda has pointed out in one of his talks, if you have 1 billion, which you couldn't begin to use all that money in a lifetime, 1 billion, particularly if it's invested and keeps making more. He said, but that's not true of someone who has 1 billion. No, they want 4 billion. And the one who has 4 billion wants 40 billion.
Yes.
And so on. So there's no end to that.
Right.
To that vanity and materialism, to that tamas and rajas, tamas materialism, vanity rajas. There's no end to it.
You're truly
It's
correct.
because our ignorance is also infinite and eternal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tragicomedy.
That's true.
That our ignorance is also primordial.
Truly agree with you.
Anything else from anyone?
Vivekananda's and John D. Rockefeller example is a great example for the material wealth, and
Oh yes.
that was the most wonderful example to read or know it.
Does everyone know what Haima's talking about? If everyone knows, then there's no sense telling the story.
You told us before.
Yeah.
And yes, that's thank you, Brother Shankara, for explaining it to me in detail. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Rockefeller's life was saved. John D. Rockefeller. His life was saved by Swami Vivekananda. He had, according to his doctors, he had a very short time to live at the time he came to see Vivekananda. And he lived for many years afterwards because of what he did based on what Vivekananda told him to do, which was a form of self-abnegation. Anything else?
I don't remember exactly, but isn't there a story of this extreme selflessness in the Upanishads where this family or the birds, they literally jump into the fire to become food for the guests?
Well, that story is maybe not the Upanishads, maybe the Puranas, but it is definitely related to us in Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga and his talks on Karma Yoga. He tells that story. He tells the story of the birds who throw themselves into the fire to feed some people that they see are under the tree who are starving. And then in that same talk, that same lecture on Karma Yoga, he mentions the Brahmin family. This Brahmin family that has just enough to feed themselves for one more night. They've been staving off starvation. But a guest comes, and the guest says, "I'm hungry, please give me something to eat." And so the father gives the guest something to eat. There are 4 members of the family. And then the guest says, "I'm still hungry." So the mother gives the guest her portion. And then the guest says 2 more times, "I'm still hungry." And the 2 children give the guest their portion. And they all starve to death. All 4 of the Brahmin family starve to death. Now, of course, in the Puranas, this guest is Dharma, is Dharma in disguise. As Yajnavalkya's, not Yajnavalkya's, Yudhishthira's dog was Dharma in disguise. So this guest is Dharma in disguise. And of course, these people are rewarded, this Brahmin family, not rewarded with longer lives, rewarded with spiritual treasure.
I was, oh, sorry, excuse me.
No, go ahead, Divya.
I was thinking of 2 things. First was the story in Sri Ramakrishna's Tales and Parables, where he there's one called "The Jar of Desire Can Never Be Filled Up," and it tells the story of a barber who, I forget how it goes, but he basically got 6 cups of how did it go? 7 jars of gold. That's it. 7 jars of gold. But the 7th jar was only half full. And he was so just like anxious about that 7th jar not being full that he forgot about the 6 other jars. And though he made an honest living, you know, as a barber, he had made enough to support himself. But as soon as he received these 7 jars, and really the 6.5 jars, he was so obsessed with filling up that 7th jar that he completely lost it until, you know, he, you know, came to his senses and realized what he was doing. And it also reminded me of this poem by Shankaracharya about King Janaka. He says, it's called "Endless is My Wealth." I just love it because it helps me think about that fictional I. The sage King Janaka.
We've lost your voice, Divya.
Oh, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you again. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. Oh yeah, it's probably because I went off to another but anyway, I was gonna read the poem out loud, but if I'm not audible, then that's okay. The poem,
we can hear you now. Well, we could hear you. Now we can't again.
you know what? When I go off of the screen, I can't read the poem to you. But it's a wonderful poem. It's called
We're losing you, Divya.
Yeah, it's you're breaking up.
No problem.
Let's just say this, The difficulty is that we put so much store by this body. Sri Krishna tries to explain to us in chapter 2 of the Gita why we shouldn't put so much store by this body. It's just a garment, it comes and goes. That which inhabits the body, that wears the body, is indestructible. But once we're in this body, we somehow, as the Swami said, we want to protect it. We want to keep it nice. We want to cling to it. We don't want it to die. So we will behave inauspiciously in order to protect the body and to sustain the body. And that's why the prayer that opens this study says, may the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. I mean, we slide right by that, but may the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. That's where the support and nourishment comes from, not from our own activities. And so we can, if we, as Father Thomas Keating says, if you truly trust in God, you don't have a care in the world. And so you could give away everything knowing that, and it's why Christ said, if someone asks you for your coat, give him your cloak also. So over and over, the teachers tell us, don't cling, don't cling, don't cling. Don't set store by things material and transient. We do it anyway. So Swamiji asks, is this giving up life for others, is it practical? Is another question. Can it be practiced in modern society? Truth does not pay homage to any society, ancient or modern. Society has to pay homage to truth or die. Societies should be molded upon truth, and truth has not to adjust itself to society. If such a noble truth as unselfishness cannot be practiced in society, it is better for man to give up society and go into the forest. That is the daring man. There are two sorts of courage. One is the courage of facing the cannon. In other words, the courage of the warrior. And the other is the courage of spiritual conviction. An emperor who invaded India was told by his teacher to go and see some of the sages there. After a long search for one, he found a very old man sitting on a block of stone. The emperor talked with him a little, and became very much impressed by his wisdom. He asked the sage to go to his country with him. No, said the sage, I am quite satisfied with my forest here. Said the emperor, I will give you money, position, wealth. I am the emperor of the world. No, replied the man, I don't care for those things. The emperor replied, if you do not go, I will kill you. The man smiled serenely and said, that is the most foolish thing you have ever said, emperor. You cannot kill me. Me the sun cannot dry. Fire cannot burn. Sword cannot kill. For I am the birthless, the deathless, the ever living, omnipotent, omnipresent spirit. And of course, we find an echo of this, not being able to be dried, wetted, burned. Sword can't kill you. in chapter 2 of the Gita, which is a wonderful summary by Krishna of the truth of our being. So Swamiji remarks about this old sage that spoke so directly to the emperor. This is spiritual boldness, while the other is the courage of a lion or a tiger. In the mutiny of 1857, there was a Swami, a very great soul, whom a Mohammedan mutineer stabbed severely. The Hindu mutineers caught and brought the man to the Swami, offering to kill him. But the Swami looked up calmly and said, "My brother, thou art he, and expired." This is another instance. What good is it to talk of the strength of your muscles, of the superiority of your Western institutions, if you cannot make the truth square with your society, if you cannot build up a society into which the highest truth will fit? If you cannot, what is the good of the strength of your muscles, the superiority of your Western institutions, if you cannot make truth square with your society, if you cannot build up a society into which the highest truth will fit? What is the good of this boastful talk about your grandeur and greatness if you stand up and say, this courage is not practical? Is nothing practical but pounds, shillings, and pence? If so, why boast of your society? That society is the greatest, where the highest truths become practical. That is my opinion. And if society is not fit for the highest truths, make it so, and the sooner the better. Stand up, men and women, in this spirit. Dare to believe in the truth. Dare to practice the truth. The world requires a few hundred bold men and women. Practice that boldness which dares know the truth, which dares show the truth in life, which dares not quake before death, nay, welcomes death, makes a man know that he is the spirit. Nay, welcomes death, makes a man know that he is the spirit, that in the whole universe nothing can kill him. Then you will be free. Then you will know your real soul. This Atman, I'm going to stop there. This is the Swami's call to us from 1895. He was speaking this to the British who ruled the world at that time. Now the United States is, at least nominally, we have our troops in over 120 countries around the world. Boots on the ground. There's a book you can read, Boots on the Ground. It's by a New York Times reporter. It's several years old now, but it's a remarkable book about how we exercise control around the world. So are we going to continue to live in that mode, measured, as Divya said earlier, no longer by pounds, shillings, and pence, but by dollars and cents, and the number of stocks that you own, the number of homes and cars? Swamiji is calling to us. And what are we going to do? It's up to each of us. And I'm not saying that there's any dogma here. The Swami would not say there's any dogma here. This is not doctrinaire. This is a call to our spirit, a call to the truth within us. How much can we live and therefore shape our society toward the ideals that he's talking about? Practice that boldness which dares know the truth, which dares show the truth in life, which does not quake before death, nay, welcomes death, makes a man know that he is the spirit, that in the whole universe nothing can kill him. Then you will be free. Then you will know your real soul. Any comments or questions before we go on with this, Swamiji?
I like the sage's story, Brother Shankara, that he said he was not afraid
Yes.
about the king. I think it's Alexander, seems like the person.
It was Alexander the Great, yes.
Great, yes. He was going in India and then asked the sage that that's a great story, great example.
And if this story is to be believed in its historical context, it took place in what is now Afghanistan, which was part of India at that time.
Yes, he can kill the man, but he can't kill the spirit. That's what exactly he was trying to say.
Yes.
You can kill me, you can't kill my spirit. It's very, very true.
Well, to him, killing the body was inconsequential.
Yes.
Just like the birds flying into the fire to feed the guests. Just like the Brahmin family giving away that which they knew that if they didn't keep it for themselves, that they would starve to death. They were that close to death.
Yes.
So
this is really great.
They lived the truth, those birds, that Brahmin family, this sage.
It's a similar example, like you can put a person in the prison, but you can't put their soul in the prison. Their soul is always thinking of what they want to think. It cannot be imprisoned.
Well, that's exactly what Nelson Mandela said.
Right.
It's what Gandhi said.
Yes, body.
It's what Sri Aurobindo said.
Yes.
It's what Martin Luther King said.
That is true.
Those who lived the truth.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. It's a great chapter.
Anyone else have anything?
Yeah, I do. Just been thinking about this, listening to about the attachment that we have to material things and wealth, and accumulating more. And of course, a part of that is just the culture, the society, and most of us, at least before we start seeking something else, we take it for granted that that's just normal human behavior, just
Yes.
right and good. And I think about the craze among many Americans of some means, who aren't poor or chronically poor, of decluttering their homes.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at the problem that they have as too much stuff. Well, maybe they have too much money. Nobody ever says, I have to get rid of some of this money.
Yeah.
They say, I've got to get rid of some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the stuff, they paid money for it. And
in time it'll come back.
Yeah. And so that sounds like a crazy thing to say. Maybe I have too much money. Culturally, that sounds like a crazy thing to say. But certain people, like, monks and nuns and all sorts of different traditions, there's not a vow or a lean toward poverty for nothing. The reason is not so that they can be pious and pure. It's so that they're not distracted
Exactly.
by money and buying stuff. And
That's what all of the monastic vows
yeah, yes, right, right.
to provide a shield and a refuge against distraction,
Yeah.
so
And
that you can focus on something more essential.
And just one other thought I had along these lines is that one of the worst things that can happen to someone, and also one of the potentially wonderful things at the same time that could happen to someone, is to lose everything materially, or even lose a lot. And I've never lost everything, but at one point I lost my income, almost lost my house, lost my savings, lost blah, blah, blah. And I can't say I know what it's like to lose everything, because I didn't lose absolutely everything, but it was so much and so sudden for me. And I'd always been so afraid of, oh, I'm going to end up homeless, and oh, I'm not going to. And that didn't happen, because I finally just gave in and gave it over. And I was just like, gave it over to the divine and said, okay. So I end up on the street. I know you'll be with me, and we'll deal with it. And things did slowly get better, but not back to that level they were before, where I was making a lot of money and felt like I needed to make more money and have this thing and that thing. And I mean, I'm not saying at all that I have released my attachment to things, but it's a lot better. It's a lot better.
Good, very good. Yes, we can't do it all at once. It's as Swami Sridharananda says, it's too great a shock to our nervous system. If we do truly something like the birds in the story or the Brahmin family in the story, then we're losing our life, so we don't have to worry about our nervous system. But it's interesting that in the Gita, Sri Krishna says, just turn yourself in devotion to me, and I'll take care of everything. And he even says, he even promises, you will not be dispossessed. You will not be on the street. You won't become homeless. And it is quite a remarkable promise. One of the stupendous promises. There's a talk that's given once every couple of 3 years about the stupendous promises of the great teachers.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I don't think Swamiji, Vivekananda Swamiji never mentioned that we shouldn't have money at all. He always supported self-reliance. I read it in either Raja Yoga or one of the books, Self-Reliance. That is also, we have to be financially self-reliant. He doesn't want us to be greedy. That's what it is, right? Isn't that
Absolutely.
we have to have money to pay the bills?
First bread.
Yes.
That is that you
Basic.
make enough money to where you don't have to worry about the wolf at the door.
Exactly.
First bread, then football, the metaphor for mastering the game of life. And if you read the first chapters, the first 18 pages of Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace, you'll find this exact same message. He doesn't quote Swamiji. He doesn't say, this is what Swamiji said, and therefore I'm saying. He speaks it of his own knowledge. But it's precisely the same message. You must have a healthy and balanced life, which Krishna also talks about in the
Exactly.
Gita.
Self-reliance.
Self-reliance and moderation. He says you
Yes.
have to be able to sustain yourself. No, it's not that you have to have nothing.
Exactly. Then we will be
But-
on the streets.
But you must not be, according to their teachings, you must not be selfish.
Yes.
You
Not
must
selfish, not
think
greedy.
first of yourself. What is selfishness? Selfishness is whenever anything arises, your first thought is, how does this affect me?
Yes.
That's selfishness.
That is selfishness. Definitely.
That is how selfishness appears in us. Whenever anything occurs, a thought occurs, an event occurs, when our first thought, when our first impulse is to think, how does this affect me?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's selfishness.
Yes.
If we think, how does this affect those I love? And that is a spreading. First, it's our family,
Exactly.
then it's our clan, so to speak,
Community, society, and country,
then society, then to the whole world
the
finally.
world. You're right.
Because as even the physicists tell us, there is nothing that happens that doesn't affect the whole universe. As Einstein pointed out, there's no such thing as separation. But if there's a vibration anywhere, the whole universe vibrates, however subtly. So there is no separation. So when we think of, instead of thinking first when a thought arises or when an event occurs, instead of thinking about yourself first, you think about others. How is this going to affect others?
Actually,
Then you're practicing selflessness.
yes.
Brother Shankara, I
Yes,
think
dear.
this COVID time is a good example of how different people are, acting with these safety precautions.
Mm-hmm.
If they think it is only about me, then they tend to get, oh, well, I'm not in the high risk, or I don't need to do this. But if they think beyond that, it is for stopping this whole pandemic. I mean, if we don't take adequate precautions, the virus is going to find somebody or the other and keep propagating, and the medical systems are getting overwhelmed. And I don't think that either the messaging is not coming out right or it's not being received right, that people are still not getting the picture.
Well, there are those people who have been taught now for years. It began in the 70s with very consciously. They have been taught for years that their individual rights are the most important thing. Hmm? So when they're confronted with the necessity of wearing a mask, they say, this interferes with my individual rights. I won't do it. And I mean, they organize demonstrations in the street, hundreds, even sometimes thousands of people, without masks on, without keeping social distancing, insisting that it is their right to put everyone else at risk so that their individual rights are not infringed on. This is the extreme of selfishness. And it's so interesting that this is producing a counter effect in society. As Swami Vivekananda said earlier, slowly, sometimes imperceptibly, sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, society, humankind, is moving in the direction of this focus on the subject rather than the object. So we will see, probably not in our lifetimes, but well, I think we'll see change, positive change in our lifetimes, but I don't think we'll see our society change in the way that Vivekananda wants. But according to the stories that are told about the coming age, the age that is ending is this age of extreme selfishness, the potential for extreme selfishness, and the age that is coming is the age of the golden age, the Satyug, the age of truth, in which human beings no longer have this sense of separateness.
I had a chance to attend a talk with a Swami from Belur, and he said something so interesting about the age of the previous Satya Yuga from which we fell, this degeneration of man, like in the Garden of Eden. It's, just listening to everyone talk, I'm just reminded, well, the Swamiji said that, back then, human beings were not as artificial in the sense that, even, many tribal societies today in India and other parts of the world, there isn't a sense of ownership in the way that we understand it. Things are shared and civilization exists to, it's, the whole idea of the family, the whole idea of the social structure exists to support that way of life as opposed to individual accumulation. Now, of course, like we're all separate. I'm, and how, I guess, like our distance to.
Divya, you're going away from your microphone. We're losing it.
Excuse, can you hear me now?
That's much better.
I apologize. So anyway, my whole point is to say that, what this whole age of this coming age of Satya Yuga, I think, our whole way of relating to each other has to change. Like how we live and just organize society will change.
It will change according to the stories that we're told. And that is this great wave of spirituality that came into the world with the advent of Thakur and Ma and the rest of their band of minstrels, as the master called them. They're coming again in 2086 to bring as part of another great wave of spirituality, the second wave of the set, so to speak. And these things, as we can see, there are many wonderful things that have happened as a result of their coming the last time. Human life is much less miserable than it was in the 1830s. At least the potential is there for it to be much less miserable. So yes, there's this move back to the Garden of Eden. That's what we're told.
And the whole question of attachment to the fruits of our labor. I mean, I wonder about Eve, why
the fruits in the Satyug, according to this, there is no labor. So you're not attached to the fruits of your labor because there is no labor. You don't have to work to feed yourself.
So how will it happen? Will humanity not need food?
That's one extreme explanation, yes. Another is that the Earth will become a garden planet again. There's archaeological and other evidence that it was at one time, that the whole Earth was temperate. There were forests in Antarctica, for example, in the Arctic. and that you could just pick your fruit off the trees. You um, dig the tubers out of the ground with a stick. You didn't have to work. You did not have to labor for your livelihood. This is one, of course, the story of the Garden of Eden tells us that these were not physical beings. Adam and Eve before they it's called the fall, but really it's just the natural progression of the spirit desiring to be part of duality. And that, of course, we can say that's our downfall. But on the other hand, the explanation is we wanted that, we as the spirit beings. But Adam and Eve, before the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that is duality, were spirit beings and had no sense of modesty because there was nothing to be immodest about. You know, this story of the fig leaves once they knew duality and had taken material form. This is all, part of the metaphor of those stories, according to those people who studied them closely.
Wow. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Shankara,
Yes,
coming
dear.
back to the current times, whatever the people that do make a lot of money, they are very wealthy, but also then use their wealth for good purposes. I think there was one disciple who even asked Sri Ramakrishna something similar. So is this all a part of a divine plan that some people have that inclination towards making a lot of money and some have an inclination towards going towards monkhood?
Well, we have to remember, dear, what Sri Krishna says is our fundamental delusion in chapters 3 and 4 of the Gita. He says the fundamental delusion, your fundamental ignorance, is that you think you are the doer. He says, no, I'm doing all this. So Vidyasagar, whose birthday is still celebrated in India, Vidyasagar, I only learned that this year. Someone told me that his birthday is still celebrated. He became very wealthy and he used his wealth very well. But what did Sri Ramakrishna tell him when he went to see him? He said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and then attend to all these other things. First, know God. And the subtext was, you'll do it much better and much more efficiently, which of course is what Krishna says in the chapters on karma yoga in the Gita. Once you have self-realization, or even are moving in that direction, you become much more efficient. Why? Because you're less distracted. We're inefficient and we make mistakes because we're distracted. When we're not distracted, we make fewer mistakes and we are able to be very productive because there's nothing distracting us from the productivity. I mean, it's really very, very instructive to read again and again chapters 2 through 6 of the Gita. The whole Gita, of course, is worth our time. That's why we study it the way we do. But chapters 2 through 6, that's the mixed nuts and fruit salad of the Gita. Everything that you need for nutrition is there.
The verse you just mentioned is in chapter 3, verse 27.
And would you read it to us?
It's, well, the one I have is a Sanskrit and Hindi version. Is in Sanskrit, it's Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ahankar Vidhu Vimuratma Karta Ahem Iti Manyate, which says that all the karmas, they are done by all the gunas.
Mhm.
But
And I am the master of the gunas.
right, but the Agyani, like just who doesn't have the knowledge, he thinks because of his ahankar,
Yes,
thinks that I am doing the things
right.
without knowing that all things are done by the gunas.
Yes. All things are done by the gunas, and he says else, not very far away from that verse, he says that I am the master of the gunas.
Right.
I know we have to go, but can I ask a follow-up question about
Of course, Stevie.
related to that? About Eve and the serpent, Satan, the idea of Satan in the duality, of course. You know, was the serpent Maya?
Well, it's difficult to jump tracks. You know, there's the Judeo-Christian way of looking at things and their metaphors. But what is it that the Judeo-Christian story says they wanted? They wanted to be like God, to know good and evil. And so they wanted to and so before that they were innocent. They had no knowledge of good and evil. They had no sense of right and wrong. There was no right and wrong. So this business of Eve somehow being the culpable one, that's patriarchy talking. You know, is the serpent Maya? Well, the closest I've been able to come and thinking about it is that the serpent is the Kundalini. And when the Kundalini rises to a certain point in us, when it awakens and it comes to the organs of generation and the third, the solar plexus, then there is this desire for the material, for the dual. And Holy Mother tells the story of creation this way. She says, a disciple asked her, how did it get to be this way? She said, well, my child, when God, by that she meant Brahma, her son, when Brahma first manifested the universe, he endowed human beings only with goodness. They soon saw that the universe created out of this goodness and their goodness was a limitation. And they said, oh, free us from this limitation. We don't want this limitation. And because their knowledge was true and their prayer was earnest, Brahma had to grant their prayer. So the universe collapsed. And so Mother said, and these are her words, Brahma thought to himself, his assignment was to manifest the universe. He thought, This is not how to make them, who are them, the Purushas. As Vivekananda said, the Atman, we somehow appear to have an individual Atman or Purusha. So Brahma said to himself, this is not how to make them play the game. And so the second time he manifested the universe, he endowed human beings not only with goodness, but with profuse quantities of materialism and vanity. And then the game could go on with a swing. Now, those three, goodness, materialism, and vanities, are the three gunas. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story is to become like those first beings who renounce materialism and vanity. They didn't have any to renounce, but any kind of limitation at all they renounced. But for us, it is to renounce our endowment of materialism and vanity and take refuge only in sattva. And then say, this sattva is the revealing power, but even that in itself is a limitation, and I want no limitation. I want to be kaivalya, independent of all limitation. Mukti, jivan mukti. And that's what the Swami is talking about here. In getting rid of selfishness, we're getting rid of materialism and vanity. They are the seeds of our selfishness and lead us to, as he pointed out earlier, treasure this garment that we're wearing, our action and experience suit. As Naveen said, we get this, the reflection of ahamkara. There's only one eye maker, but because there's only one, in fact, but nevertheless, we have this illusion of selfhood, which is a reflection of this ahamkara. So then we think this is something. This action and experience suit is something. It's not. That's why the story that Swami Vivekananda told about the old sage and Alexander. When Alexander said, I'll kill you. The old sage, in one version of the story, laughs out loud and says, this is the most foolish thing you ever said. You can't kill me. I'm not this thing. You can do away with this, but I'm not burned by fire, wetted by water, cut by sword. I am the eternal, omnipresent being. So Adam and Eve, according to the Judeo-Christian story, Adam and Eve were part of that omnipresent being. They were one with God. But there was just that, within that oneness, there was that desire to be something separate that knew all of what God knew. It is difficult for us to jump tracks from Vedanta to the Judeo-Christian and make sense of the two. But that's as close as I've been able to come.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
is it possible to become that unselfish before realization? Or in other words, does realization lead to that complete unselfishness, or does unselfishness lead to realization?
Swami Prabhavananda, when he was still Abani, before he even became a brahmachari, was studying Adi Shankaracharya's Vivekachudamani. And they were on that part of the very early part of the Vivekachudamani, where Adi Shankaracharya is talking about the qualifications for being a student. And, that it's a very high bar indeed, to become a qualified student. And so Swami Prabhavananda said to Turiyananda, well, if you've achieved all this, you've already reached the goal. And Turiyananda just laughed, chuckled, and said, ah, I see you have solved the mystery. The delusion is, Swayam, that we are somehow not that already. As earlier in what was read tonight, Swamiji said, you're already pure, you're already perfect, you're already omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. He didn't say that word, but that's implied. So it happens together. It's not sequential. We somehow rid ourselves through our spiritual practices of our delusion. But as the Sufis say, and they're so right, you can prepare yourself and prepare yourself and prepare yourself. But until the beloved says, "Boop," it won't happen. But where's the beloved? The beloved is here. It's not out there. We stay deluded as long as we somehow want to. We stay distracted as long as we want to. As Holy Mother said, one of her disciples said, Mother, you gave me the mantra. I've been practicing a couple of years. I don't seem to be getting anywhere. Why not? And Mother said, in one of her moments of wry humor, she said, oh, it's very simple, my dear. Realization is just a moment away. All you have to do is stop wanting anything at all, even realization. So, Mother was, of course, very sweetly and very mildly teasing her devotee, her disciple. And what do we see when we study the life of Holy Mother? The Master created this Yoga Maya, this situation of Radu and Surabala and all of this business in order that Mother would want something, that she would want their welfare, want them to, and so stay embodied. Because as she points out from time to time in what we've read, I could go any time. As soon as I renounce this, I'm out of here. She didn't want anything or need anything. And again, this is something that Krishna says in the Gita. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. I already am everything. I'm only here to do my job. And so he says, help me. You behave this way too, so as not to confuse others. And it's really it's really quite moving what he says about don't behave in such a way as to confuse the ignorant, because they'll follow you if you're, becoming powerful through your increasing knowledge. He says, I have to be very careful because, and Sri Ramakrishna, he spoke very plainly. He said, these are his very words. He said, if I urinate standing up, my followers will urinate standing up and twirling around. So this is we as spiritual aspirants. This is why it's called the razor's edge. We have to be earnest and sincere and pursue our goals. And at the same time, we have to be self-forgiving. And what we find is when we step off the razor's edge, it's not much of a fall to the ground. It's just a step off to the ground. But now we're no longer on the razor's edge, and we may wander off, as Mark Twain pointed out, and it was read a week or so ago. So many little attractive side roads. But then we get it again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We get back on the razor's edge, and we continue our very careful progress forward. So it's to stop wanting anything, even realization. This is one of the key principles of Zen Buddhism. You want nirvana? Stop wanting nirvana. Anything else?
Thank you.
You're welcome, dear.
One last word, Brother Shankara, one last comment. You
Yes,
said
honey.
self-forgiving. Yes, that is very, very, very important in our lives. It's so difficult sometimes for us to forgive ourselves. If we cannot forgive ourselves, we can never forgive anyone else around us.
Exactly.
We have to learn to forgive ourselves. Definitely. We do make mistakes. It's a gift of imperfection. There we have imperfections. Like
Yes.
Brene Brown, she says, gifts of imperfection. We all have those.
It's built in.
It is.
We are endowed with profuse quantities of materialism and vanity, so that the game could go on. But we have to remember we are that which wanted the game to go on.
That's right.
We are not apart from Brahma. We are not apart from Vishnu or from Shiva.
That's right.
We are that.
Sure.
So I buy a kind of tea called yogi tea. It has little tea tags. And one of them the other day said, self-forgiveness is the gateway to happiness.
Yes, very true.
And for me, that was a very good one to receive that day.
It's very true. And then you can make friendship with yourself, then you can make friendship with the world. If we are not making friendship with ourselves, we cannot make friendship with the world around us.
No, we cannot.
We have to practice it, daily practice.
As Sri Ramakrishna points out, a child does not see a thief. A thief may come into the room.
Very true. Very
that, and he also says, the mother may say to this, to this child, this is your elder brother. Look on this person as your elder brother. And so they'll eat from the same plate from as that elder brother that they think is their elder brother, even though that person is as the caste of a blacksmith. Of course, that's in the caste system as it existed in Sri Ramakrishna's
right. It's very
time. So when we are childlike like that, but when we're not, it doesn't do any good to beat ourselves up about it. You know, that if we're impatient, that's just another form of distraction. Return to principle, return to prayer, return to your mantra, return to whatever it is that centers you.
Thank you.
And you know, love yourself and love. I mean, is it not easy to love the rest of the people that are here with us tonight?
Yes.
Of course it is.
Very easy.
But then extend that, and that's the harder part. And to the person who is not wearing a mask in the supermarket, who is, you know, it's.
It is. It's very tough. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Great discussion.
Anything else from anyone before we call it a night? Well, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. May you have a wonderful day tomorrow.
You too, Brother Shankara. We'll see you around 4:30 maybe.
Yeah, we'll start our open house at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
4 to 5:30.
Okay.
And so anyone who wants to drop by and
Great.
tell us about their day and just have a sweet conversation, here we'll be. Any final thoughts before we close? All right. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. May you have peace of mind, and may you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Thanksgiving.
Good night. Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Good night, dearest.